Welcome back to another TouchDesigner tutorial. Today we are going to be making this particle with our particle GPU and some noises and using this through some audio-reactivity. And it's going to be a fun little experience. So let's get into this. All right, so what we're going to do here is we are first going to go into here and close everything out. Hit the X button over here and recreate a new base. So I'm going to add a base container. And it's right there, sure, under base, right? And we're going to go inside this and start building this system. So the first thing we're going to do here is we're going to add a constant and bring up our parameter window by pressing P so we can start putting some things in. And I'm going to change this to res x. I'm going to add a couple fields here. I'm going to change this to res y. Call this one scale x. And then call this one scale y. Okay, so now we have our little parameters here, and I'm just going to call this, because it's not just resolutions here, I have some other things. I'm going to call this settings. And then I'm going to change this to black, because black is the best, right? And so let's start kind of building this out. And what we're going to be playing with today is a particle GPU. And so I'm going to open up my palette screen here, and I'm going to look for particle GPU. It should be under P, because that makes sense, right? And as I find that, there it is. Oh, yep, under the alphabet. Okay, I get in here, I add this particle GPU, and you can see what's happening here. We have some different things. We have some leaves, we have a box, and so we're going to be adjusting what we just did through this particle GPU. And if you look inside this particle GPU, there's a whole bunch of things going on. Many things, okay? So the one thing we're going to do is not mess with that, but I'm going to go into here and just let what has been made for us be made for us. But so how are we going to do this? So first of all, we're going to kind of skip this process of this 3D space within this cube, and we're going to add a UV. So I'm going to go into here and I'm going to pick a ramp. I'm going to take this ramp, and right after from my parameters, here I set up a whole bunch of amazing parameters. So I'm going to go in here and I'm going to change this to something that kind of works for, I don't know, a festival or something like that. But we're going to use something we use here at Berkeley NYC, and we're going to use our LED screen. So I'm going to do 2464 for our X, and then I'm going to do 880 for our Y. So this gives me these kind of variables here. And I'm going to take this, put this in my common. Turn this on so I can select this. I'm going to change my resolution. And I'm going to change my resolution for my Y, right? So I have two different things here. I'm also going to take this and go into my comment. I'm going to change this to 32-bit float mono, right? I'm going to take this. I'm going to copy and paste it. So I have two of them. And change this one. And under my ramp, I am going to go to vertical this time, right? So, and then what am I going to do? I'm going to reorder these. So I'm going to bring in a reorder. Okay. Bring this into the 1. Bring this into the 2s. Right. So I'm kind of reordering these things together. And I'm going to change my second input 2 to green. And I'm going to change this one to 0. And nothing happened. Why didn't it? Because the reorder is looking for the inputs from my resolutions, and it's just pushing that back out of mono. So I need to change this and change it to 32-bit float. Okay. So we have this. I'm going to move this over to the side here. And, oh man, it never wants to do this on the stream. Okay. So we're going to slide this over to the slide. And then we're going to have to change some things in here, right? So one of the things I want to do is, how do we look at this in space? So I'm going to bring in this thing called a point transfer. And this gives you like where it is sitting in space, but you can't see it unless you press this plus button. I go into here, I right click, and I do view as point. So now I can see where our little triangle, or not triangle, our square is in space, right? And it's not even the right scale. That is why I added a scale in here. So under our point transfer, I'm going to go in here, and I can see under our weights and all the rest of the stuff is this scale thing. So I'm going to go into here from our scale values. I'm going to put our scale over here and reference this and reference this for the Y. And of course, there's no values in there, right? But I made this tutorial once, so I kind of know the values. So I'm going to do a 5. I'm going to do a 2. And you can see now it's kind of changing this in space based on this scale, right? And we have this rectangle going over to the side, okay? But what do we want to do? We want to center that, right? Because why adjust a bunch of camera settings when we can move this in this point transfer? So I'm going to go into our point transfer, and we've done this many different ways, and there's 10 different ways to do this. But I'm going to go into here, and in this align, I'm going to do this align x-axis to origin, and align this y-axis also to origin, right? So it put it in the space. And so now when we look at these things, we can see what is happening. How amazing is that? Okay. I'm going to add a null onto the end of this. And I'm just going to say this like position, right? So this is our position for our space here. And if you look under here, our first thing that we have here is our particle source, right? So this is like, where are these particles going to be coming from? I'm going to move this into here. And as we start out, you can see that it is going to create this little field where our particles are now going to be defined coming from a certain source, okay? But, so let's change some of the stuffs in here. So the first thing we're going to do is I'm going to add a comp, and I'm going to add a camera, and I'm going to use a camera to change the view of this because I don't want to move all this stuff around. So I'm going to go under here under render, and I can see where this has its camera. I'm going to drag this over the camera right now. So I'm looking dead right on it. Okay, so amazing. Let's add an out. So we have what we can look at, and we can start to put this on the screen, okay? So I'm going to add an out. I'm going to drag it over here because I'm going to do some other stuff, of course. And I'm going to drag this out into here. So now I can see what's happening. We have leaves on the screen. How pretty is that? It is spring. It is not fall, but it is amazing. Okay, so what can we do here? Let's change this. First of all, let's add a transform so we can see a black background. And I'm going to add a transform in here. I'm going to change this alpha value to 1. And I'm going to do comp over back, right? So let's not look at the leaves, even though they are very pretty. So I'm going to change this material here. And you can see under this says constant leaf, all the rest of the stuff. Constant materials, right? All of our materials. If we look in our materials, we see our materials, we see constant, we see line, see fongs, all the rest of the stuff. What am I going to select? I'm going to select a line. So now we're just looking at points. Why is this great? Because now it looks like it's snowing. It is not snowing here in New York right now. It is March. So anyways, this is okay. So, but we're going to use this to kind of alter some things. And we can see this. And the cool thing about the particles, you can go into our particle GPU, and this is only birthing at 5, right? So if I had 1,000, it's going to show our particles. Holy smokes, snowing like crazy. Anyways, let's put this back down to 5 for a minute because we're going to adjust this stuff through, and we just need to be able to see the screen. So I'm going to start there. What are we missing here? Let's add some color. Right. And so those are some of the things we want to do. And so this color, and we're going to add some color, but we're also going to kind of move how these things are moving in space because everything's kind of just like pushing down. So I'm going to add 2 things here. I'm going to add a noise. And in this noise, I'm going to take this from my same settings here. Whoa. Noise over here. Go to our common. I'm going to take our resolutions, and I'm going to drag this over here. So we have this, and we have this for our Y, right? And this is always going to be consistent, no matter how we change these things, okay? Our noise, I'm going to go over here. I'm going to do comp from the monochrome. I'm going to switch that to color, so we have some color. I'm going to change my period. I don't know, let's say 10. Maybe it's too big. Who knows? Probably too big. Let's say 4. I'm going to take this noise and put it into another noise, right? Once that noise is the other noise, it's following this noise. It has the same input if you look under comment because it's picking up the output resolution from the other one. So that's amazing. So in this noise, let's change some other things with this. So I'm going to change my harmonics to 10. I'm going to change my period on this to 4, right? It's pretty blown out. That is crazy. I'm going to change my offset here and change my amplitude, kind of give some dark spaces and things like that, right? And this is going to kind of push our stuff in space, right? This is what we're going to be creating this thing. If you look under this outlet or inlet here, it's called optical flow. So this noise is going to move how we do things here. So in this noise, I'm just going to add our little fun little ABS time dot seconds. And I'm going to divide this by 10 so we have some movement in here, right? So things are kind of transforming and moving, and that's amazing. Wow. Okay, but this gives us this awesome ability now to take this and put this into our optical flow. And now everything's going crazy, right? Why is it going crazy? Because it's moving too fast and there's too many things happening. So what we can do here is we can add a math. And once we add a math, we're going to change how this works. And I'm going to change this range and this multiply and this math. And I'm going to put this down to 0, 1. And it's kind of bringing us back to normal. But why are we doing all that stuff? Because we are using these noises as our optical flow. And why do that? Because right now I could bring some sensors out, I could bring some connects out, I could bring some MIDI controllers, do all these things, but then I'm going to have more cameras and I have to show you all this stuff. So I'm just using this as a reference of like how I'm creating something, and then you can bring in those other elements to do sensor and body tracking stuff to be able to how you switch that. But this is like the start of the process, right? So we have that going into that. We have this, and let's add some color to these now, okay? So what I'm going to do here is, honestly, I'm just going to take this noise right here. I'm going to copy and paste it so I have the same resolution, so I don't have to copy from there. And I'm going to switch this a little bit. And I'm going to take, honestly, this out because I'm going to do something different here. And if you see over here, this little button, if I press that, it deletes it, right? So I'm not worried about that anymore. And I'm going to switch this noise to, I don't know, let's say 10, because I do want this one bigger. And I'm going to switch this one back into monochrome. Okay. So I'm going to take a ramp now here and put this ramp, and I'm going to have this noise look up at this ramp. So what I need to do here for my ramp is change my settings to my resolution. As long as I do this in the beginning, then I'm never worried when I go down the road about where is all this stuff and where do I find all this stuff later, right? Because now I can just switch whatever resolutions I want in here and everything's going to switch. One thing you've noticed, and I've noticed by looking at this, is my render screen right here going into my output is not this resolution, because my resolution is very wide. How do I change that? If I go into my particle GPU, I go under a render, I see these two settings for resolution here. So I'm going to take my same values and drag these over, and now you can see the screen is now rendering appropriately to what I have going on in here. Okay, so this is my screen. If I look at it, I can see this is what I'd be rendering out to whatever my output is. Okay, so let's go back in here and we can see our two noises. I'm going to add a lookup in here and have the noise, the first noise look into this lookup, and we have to find the lookup, and it is there. And it's under L for lookup because that's how things are in this program alphabetically, and that's amazing. Okay, so within our noise, let's add some color here. So I'm going to change this ramp and I'm going to add some color in here. So I'm going to pick a thing and a point up on the top. I'm going to add a blue. Here I'm going to add, like, I don't know, purple, right? And now I have this ramp that is kind of pushing through that, right? And we have our ramp within our field. Our periods may be a little bit strong here. So let me back this step back down, right? So we have something like this. And now, once we take this, we can take these values per se within our little thing, and we can just, let's put a null at the back of this, and I'm going to just call this color, right? Let's slide this over so everything is right next to each other. And in this color, name it color. I'm going to go up here into our particle, and in my inlet, you'll see that it says particle source color, okay? Drag this over. Particle source color, right? Ooh, how amazing is that? Look at that. Our snowflakes are no longer white, if they are snowballs or snowflakes or whatever. They are now changing into something else. But let's adjust some of this stuff, and let's look at some of these parameters in the particles, right? So if we go into our particles, we can see that we have like our bursts. And now if we bring this up to, let's say, 1,000, we can see that we have, whoa, something going on. That's a cool effect. Could use this all day long. This life minimum, right? How things are minimum and our life variances. I'm going to change this, let's say, to 20. I'm going to change this to 20, just some different variables. But also our particle size right here is important too. Size, type, right? Random. We can go to age. This is a cool look, right? Sure. Can do this all day long. It's amazing. We can bring in some different chops to change this, but this has like an idea. And these effectors down in here are different things that you could bring into this of how this is being affected, right? I'm going to go back to random. I'm going to change this minimum size and our particle size max. I'm just going to take this to make it smaller. So I'm going to go to 0.1 on some of them. And then I'm going to go to, let's say 1 on the next one, right? So we have 2 different sizes. We have some bigger ones. We have some smaller ones. Things are happening in space. How amazing is that? What would be really cool is if we added in some feedback, because feedback is the best, right? So I'm going to change this, and I'm going to add a null in here, just so I have this out of the back of my thing. Whoop. And drag this over here, and let's just, let's not worry about that right now, because we're just going to reconnect it, or sure, let's do it. Okay, so it's connected. Now, here I'm going to go in and add a feedback. So wonderful feedback right there, easy to find, right in the bottom. Okay, you can drag this into the feedback. Then I'm going to take off the back of this feedback, I am going to insert a level. And in my level, I'm going to go to my post, and I'm going to change my opacity to 0.97. Why? I don't know. Let's try it. Okay. The other thing too is we are going to go into a composite, and we're going to bring these two together. And the why is for my opacity, with giving the answer this time, is I'm looking through this and saying, I need to see what's happening behind the feedback. What is the opacity? Like right now, you can see in our composite, we are multiplying. Okay, so if I go to multiply, I go to over, now I can see where things are because they're sitting over something else. If I go back into my level and I change this and it's just over 1, right, there isn't any opacity within this screen. So it's just composition basics and whatever you want to do there, right? So a lot of times I do 0.99, 0.98, 0.97, whatever. The cool thing is that we have this feedback, but we don't have anything happening to the feedback. So once we drag this on top of the other feedback, now we have this beautiful scene, right? So that is absolutely amazing. What can we do here? So this is cool, but we have no way of starting this or stopping it. And the biggest thing that you can do is obviously find a keyboard in to be able to jumpstart this system, right? So I'm going to go into my feedback. I'm going to drag my keyboard in. Then when I press 1, it's going to pulse this. I hit that for chop reference. Every time I do that, my feedback is now pulsing, which is cool. The other cool thing too is in Particle GPU, I also can reset this. So I'm going to take this to this reset. I'm going to drag it over. Now I'm going to have this. So every time I do this, the particles start and stop. How amazing, right? Super cool. Okay. This is fun stuff, but let's make this part of this thing with audio reactivity is let's make some audio reactivity kind of move through this stuff and like how we position it and, you know, what are we going to do within this? And let's start moving through that kind of process. So what I'm going to do here is bring in a audio file in, right? And this is our wonderful TouchDesigner music that everyone I'm sure is familiar with. If they've used this program, it is the default. I'm not going to play it here because everyone's heard it. I'm going to go to my palette and I'm going to go into audio analysis, right? Easy way, instead of making a whole bunch of other things, I'm going to bring this in here. And honestly, in the audio analysis, this exists, right? But at the same point, I'm putting this out there in case you want to bring your own file. Like if we go in here, you can see there is a default that is bringing this in. Same wonderful song, okay? So we have this. We're going to pick some values from this. So first thing I'm going to do is I am going to add a select. And when I add a select, I'm going to pick my favorite 2 things, which are going to be the kick and the snare, right? Because everyone loves a kick and a snare, but I'm not seeing any of that stuff. So when I look at this, I need to adjust some parameters so I can see it. In the audio analysis tool, if I hit the plus, I hit kick and I hit snare, now I see these values, okay? I'm going to drag these thresholds a little bit over here so it's just not going too much, but now I have like some consistency, you know, maybe not some. This is how you adjust like what is coming through. Okay, so we have these 2 values. That is pretty cool. And what do we want to do with this? The first thing I'm going to do here is I'm going to add a speed after this. Why am I going to add a speed? Who knows, right? I do. But at the same point, I'm just kind of changing how these things are happening because I don't want it to happen as much. Like every single time it hits, that's amazing. But also, I don't need to see that. So we have now taken this 0 and this 0 to 1, 0 to 1, 0 to 1, and brought this into some other numbers, which is exactly why I'm using it. The other thing too, I'm going to add a math here because as much as I love this now float value and these decimal points, I want to switch this into an integer. So I'm going to go in here and bring this math in here, and I am basically going to ceiling here. So now I have these values and they are moving this way. Okay. What am I going to do with this? So one of the things I want to do over here is I want to adjust these noise and have these noises move and kind of go through, because as we switch this stuff in our noise, we can see as we change our seeds, this is also changing how this like optical flow is going to be affected, right? So I want to have something that kind of drives that system. And right now I'm just doing this kind of transform on here just to kind of do something, but let's delete that out. So if we move that out, we take that out. I want this to kind of switch with this and have these values start to drive that. Does that make sense? I hope it does, because it makes sense to me. Okay, so what we're going to do here is I'm going to put a limit on this. And in my limit, I am going to, first of all, I'm starting to impede in my space. So I'm going to take this whole section and slide this over so I have some more room. And I'm going to put a null at the end of this, because that is what you do, right? Oh, what other cool thing. Let's add a rename in here so we can make sure that we have everything the way that we want to do it and how things are going. Then I'm going to show you a cool little trick in here. So our limit, I'm just going to put this as a loop. And I want this to loop between certain values, right? So I'm going to say loop between this, and I'm going to say loop between this as a 3, right? And this gives me that value as, it's always just going to keep looping. But what would be cool is I don't want to always have the same type of noises things in here. So if I say I'm taking this, but I'm going to loop this between, I don't know, 500 and 600, now I have these values to play with. So like within my noise, under my types of seeds, I can now define when these things are working, right? So in this rename, I have two values coming in here. I have the kick and the snare. So I want to rename these to noise 1 and noise 2, right? Now everything has switched because two values coming in, two different names here, noise 1 and noise 2. Okay, so I can go in here now and I can create this in my seed value. And I'm going to take this and put this in my one seed here and put this in another seed over here, right? And these are now, as you can see, the cool thing, it's giving two kind of random values per se, right? Because not 100% random, because something's driving them, it's pushing them through the seed, but they're not like seed 501, seed 501. So they're two different values. And you can do those with beats and other things like that, okay? So what else have we noticed here? We are moving things, but we want to change some other stuff. Everything is kind of flowing down. We're going to get into the particle GPU and look at some of those pieces right here, okay? So I'm going to take this same select. I'm going to copy and paste it. So now I have another section over here. I'm going to go to the same thing over here. I'm going to add a limit. And in my limit here, I'm going to go to a loop. And I'm going to change this to 0 to 3 because we have 4 beats in a measure, right? Or in a bar or in a measure, whatever you want to say. 4 beats in the measure, 4 and 4, 4. Not getting overly musical here. It's not the point. But at the same point, we're looking at this and we're saying, okay, we're limiting this to this types of things, right? We're having this 0 to 3 and what we have going in that. I'm going to then take this into a count, right? So as I count through everything of how this is working. So this is going 0, yep, okay, amazing. So what is this limit doing? I don't know. Who cares? This count, what I want to do here is I want to shift this into something and look through this and say, I only want these values to stay. But I also have this select that's picking up 2 values. I only need 1 value. So if I go into this, I can just delete snare, right? So now I'm only picking up the kick, which is amazing. In this count, I also have this ability in this limit to clamp this or loop min or clamp min, all the rest of fun stuff, right? I'm going to take this and I'm going to switch this to now 0 to 3. All right, so I have this and it's basically counting. I'm going to pulse this to get rid of decimals. So now it's going, yep, 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 0, 1, 2, 3, right? Make sense? Sure. Okay, so we have this count and now let's do some math on the back of this count because I'm going to take this because I'm going to move some stuff here in a second is I want, as these things are coming up within this range and it's coming in from this range of 0 to 3, I'm going to adjust when this stuff comes in and what it is doing, right? In this math, I'm going to switch this or here as we have these different values, because now you can see it's breaking this out into decimals. So in my range, I'm going to go 0 to 3, but I want this to go from -1 to 2. Okay. So now this is going -1, 0. Okay. Get it? Cool values. Let's put a rename on the back of this. And then we are going to also put a null at the end of this. And in this rename, I am going to name this, because one of the things I want to show you here in this particle GPU is we have this, the forces part. And you can see this external force, it's under a constant right now. And I can switch this to an age. I can switch this all over the place. But right now it's at -1. Everything's flowing down, right? If I increase this or I go to 1, now everything is going the opposite way. Right? So how things are flowing, how things are pushing in space. Why I just built this thing is I thought this would be cool to kind of have the music alter this. So in our rename, one of the things that I looked at under particle GPU was this external type, right? This kind of force external type. So I'm going to rename this to ext force, right? What happened here? Why is it only showing ext? Why it is because I have a space right here. So if I bring this back over, because now this is a variable, right? And it's putting this in here and everything is staying the same. It makes sense because like we had up here, we had two different things that we were bringing in. And in our rename here, we had noise with a space and noise with a noise two with us sitting next to it. So it defined that. But here we only needed to rename one thing. Right? So we just keep all the same things together. Hopefully that makes sense. Just good things to have. And we'll go from there, right? I'm not going to totally, I really want to, but well, okay. So I'm going to leave this here as I try not to reorganize everything. But in this particle GPU now, we just change this value. So we're going to take our new value right here and we're going to change this and put it right here. So now as it's moving through the music, or as it's hitting the kick, this thing is kind of altering in space, right? And it's pretty cool. So it's kind of pushing through, it's kind of flowing through. What are some other things that we see that are happening here? I think everything is moving pretty fast, right? So if I go back to P, bring up my parameters, I go to my particle GPU, I see these other fields down here. I can change this speed and slow everything down. Right? So if I change the speed down to, I'm going to do 5 for an hour, 0.5, just so we have a variable. But I think this is the case where you could bring in your MIDI controllers, you could bring in other devices, some sliders, some faders, all the rest of the stuff, and just have this be adjusted, right? So you could make this more real time of bringing this in, bringing this out, and doing things like that. Okay, so we're bringing this to a speed of 5. The other thing too is we can see that we have this ability kind of with this drag, because drag bring like where things are sitting in space. As I bring this up, right? Think about physics, it's dragging this down. So let's just put this at 5. I don't know, it seems like a fun idea. Okay, so now kind of things are moving and there's some drag to it. Maybe that's too much. I can bring this back down. Let's say 3. So we still have some movement. Okay. So it's dragging in space and it's pushing and we have all the rest of the stuff. The other thing too is you can play around with these values again, right? Go into the age, go into some other things like what are things looking like? I mean, I think that's a cool look, right? We could take this whole thing right here. We could put an edge at the back of this because edges are always so much fun. And if we do this comp over edge, now we have this type of scenario, right? So we could bring up our strength, bring this up. 2, 2, 2. So we're creating kind of this like, you know, abstract type of field, which is kind of a cool look, but I'm just gonna turn that off right now because we don't need that. And you can see what happened to my FPS. Whoa, changed, right? That's doing a lot of stuff. I'm gonna switch this back to constant, back where we had it before, and or to random. And then we have our 2 different spaces here, and we're bringing that back in. I just hit pulse, or I hit 1 on my keyboard that pulsed everything, okay? The other cool thing is I have this speed over here that's moving through. I'm going to take this ramp with this color because everything is kind of just sitting exactly in this space, right? So in this color, we can change this phase value because we brought this speed. So I'm going to change this speed off here with this kick, and I'm going to drag that onto phase. So now it's moving through. So our ramp and through our lookup and our noise are now shifting through that space. I can do the same with the noise before, where I had this transform or translate right here. I can change that same thing and bring the snare into that value, right? So now it's like moving through the space. So things are going up, things are going down, and different types of things like that, right? So it's giving this opportunity to kind of shift through some of those things and what kind of that looks like. And it's creating these like fun little trails. Same with the particle GPU. I can go back through here. I can look at what my drags are. I can change all that stuff. Like, what is the effect? What are you trying to achieve? And the fun thing about this is you just have this ability to kind of play with this stuff. And, you know, if I make bigger particles, let's say I go up to 2 on this, you know, some things are getting bigger, some are smaller. So it's the ability to create. And once you build that out, I can go into that same type of thing. Is I can go into here, I can change these colors. The next thing you know, I have a completely different look, right? So it's kind of this organic growth, you know, type of thing. Same with the math. Back in here in my math, I have these values of -3 to what? Like, let's say I want this to go more down the other way, right? So what's going up, then it's going down, up, then it's going down. I have that look too. So all kinds of cool, fun little things that you can do. And it's really a playground for you to explore and make some very cool, creative, abstract type of art. And that is all I have for you. Thank you so much.